Members here at the college. We're getting ready to start session number 2. We'll have 2 30-minute presentations in session 2, and then we'll follow that by 15 minutes of questions and answers. Our first presentation for session 2 is comparing face-to-face learning to computer-aided learning in a physical therapy physical agents course, a retrospective analysis.
Thank you, Dr. Ross. So we're going to switch gears a little bit to now more on the educational side of physical therapy. So Dr. Ross kind of explained our title there. My name is Sean Rimmer. I'm here with my colleagues Daemen Presentation, Dan Finglin, Justin Kozlowski, and our research mentor throughout this process was Dr. John Stura.
Okay, so some learning objectives we have set for today's presentation is to first understand the difference between the 2 different learning or education models, which is the computer-aided learning and the face-to-face. Second is to understand the strengths and weaknesses associated with both models. And the third is to list 2 limitations of the study. So our original research question was to determine if there's a difference between learning outcomes associated with college students based on modes of education delivered, and that's face-to-face versus computer-aided learning. So the first step in this process was to see the available literature, and there's a lot of literature out there comparing these types of education models, but we had to narrow it down to the ones that focus on college level classes associated with health science, so physical therapy and medical literature.
So a little bit about the background. So there are many factors that influence learning. I have a little bit of depiction here. So we have the content of education. So what is the course that the students are taking? Is it something that's required of them? Is it something that they're interested in or not so much? The environment, is it something that's in a large auditorium of students where it's difficult to even ask a question? Or is it more with a better ratio of student to teacher where it's a little bit easier to talk to them and get better feedback on their questions? Or again, in our case, are we looking at more online? So where it's more of a one-to-one or where possible questions cannot be asked right away. The educator, so is the educator competent in the material that they're teaching? Or are they passionate about it, or not so much? All these factors are going to play a role in how the education is delivered to the student learner. So the current gold standard for learning is face-to-face, which is termed mostly in the literature, but it's pretty much any type of lecture we usually see in colleges contained in a lecture hall of students. However, within the past decade or so, education has had a shift to more of an online component through all the technology that's been accessed through YouTube, PowerPoint, etc., which we'll discuss about further. So, again, based on the online approach, termed in the literature computer-assisted instruction or computer-aided instruction, we have several vehicles where the students can obtain this material knowledge. So as you can see here, simply laptops, computers, iPads, and even such as iPhone nowadays. Usually presentations are performed on PowerPoint that are either narrated or non-narrated. So the educator will actually update a podcast to the Microsoft PowerPoint so the student can follow along in real time and pause as they need it or not. CD-ROM, so at Daemon here we have our whole pharmacology course through a CD-ROM where pre-lectures are posted and we can print the material from that CD-ROM. And then YouTube, so the PowerPoint can be embedded into YouTube, and actually it'll be just a video-based PowerPoint with narratives similar to just the PowerPoint, or the benefit of YouTube is actually just the whole video, so it can be a recorded lecture in actual video format. The hybrid or blended-based mode of educational delivery is what it is. It's a combination of face-to-face, so in lecture, and online. So we looked at some of the literature based on solely the online approach of computer-aided instruction, as well as the hybrid or blended approach. We'll get into a little bit of advantages of both matters of the computer-aided instruction and some drawbacks, but based on all the literature that we sifted through relative to the research based on computer-aided instruction, hybrid component, and just face-to-face, we found no significant difference between the cognitive as well as the psychomotor or hands-on domains of learning regarding the educational modes of delivery.
So as Sean alluded to, there are several advantages and disadvantages to computer-aided instruction. First, we'll go over the advantages that make learners actually right. The first one is probably the biggest point here is the convenience of time and self-pacing. Convenience of time is on the student's own clock. They can perform the learning whenever it's moved to them, versus a lecture that occurs at a scheduled time and every day. Self-pacing is being able to pause a presentation, rewind if they need to, go back through and touch up on a point that they didn't quite understand the first time through. The next two bullets are kind of go hand in hand with self-pacing. It allows them to find when learning is the most appropriate for them, when they're able to perform it and get the most out of it. And also gives them a critical thinking skills, allow them to pause and reflect on what they are learning. The fourth one there, virtually unlimited review materials available. This is, again, so if they're confused about some kind of topic, they can pause it, they can go on the great World Wide Web and search for more solutions to it. The fifth one there touches upon the institution itself, so flexibility of student space. By having a class offered through an online type approach, that frees up the classroom for other classes to use the traditional approach. And then lastly, this kind of touches on the blended learning that Sean talked about, and it's accommodated in many different learning styles. So people who might learn better from a computer have that aspect in their course, whereas people who have a traditional learning also have that in their options and their curriculum as well. Okay, so now we'll go over some disadvantages that make people angry, such as this link. So the first one is also probably the biggest one here. It allows immediate feedback to student questions. When you're in a lecture-based setting, you have the opportunity to have real-time responses to your questions answered. And this can lead to difficulties in concept clarification and also risk for neglected students to seek instructional assistance. If they can't ask it right then, they might hold off and never have that information answer that they want to. Next one is cost. There's several costs associated with online learning, most specifically the software involved. Most online lectures use a PowerPoint format, which is in the Microsoft Office. That's either a cost that's associated with the school, such as Daemon, we offer the Microsoft Office package, or to the student. So somewhere someone has to pay for that program for the information delivery. Next is faculty time and the setup it requires. So a lot of more traditional faculty might have a lesson plan set from year to year. If they plan on going to a computer-aided instruction, they have to set up a PowerPoint online as well as a podcast to go along with it. So there's a lot of time associated with that. Last, we're going to have a little bit of audience participation. Who has ever had technical difficulties with Wi-Fi connection, any type of computer lag, freezing, crashing?
Yeah.
About everyone in here. So that definitely has to be this definitely has to be factored in as well as a major disadvantage to instruction.
Okay, so based on the literature, the acquisition model was best defined as test scores, essentially. The research suggested that the acquisition of knowledge was best evaluated through grading student performance with evaluations of the material. Of the 18 studies we reviewed, 10 in total examined blended learning approaches, Sean explained a bit earlier, setting which offer both face-to-face and computer-aided components. 5 were strictly computer-aided, so no face-to-face meetings between the class and the professor. And in total, 8 revealed no significant difference between face-to-face and computer-aided methods, which suggests that they are both potentially as effective in student acquisition of knowledge. So here, the research by Veneri and Gennady was somewhat representative of many of these cases we reviewed. They showed a 5% higher average in the face-to-face group over the computer-aided instruction group. However, the overall course scores were not clinically or somewhat significant in the overall difference between scores. The research by Albertani and Higgins, they reviewed all three of the approaches that we listed here, so computer-aided, face-to-face, and the blended approach. They noted, somewhat similar to the reviews of just face-to-face and computer-aided, that there was no significant difference between the models. However, the introduction of the blended material was somewhat significantly higher than just strict computer-aided instruction. So there's some weight there. Here we have a screenshot of the studies reviewed, and you can see it's somewhat split in half. The studies that reviewed face-to-face and computer-aided really showed no significant difference in the acquisition of student knowledge between the two delivery models. But then at the bottom, you can notice that the addition of combination, face-to-face and computer-aided, the hybrid approach seemed to be somewhat superior to strict face-to-face or strict computer-aided instruction.
Okay, here we see a second study showing evidence related to retention of knowledge in the literature. And as you can see here, this evidence is pretty contradictory, showing 3 studies, no significant difference, and 2 supporting either computer-aided or face-to-face models of delivery. And the reason why this is so contradictory is if you review the methods, the retention is poorly, the parameter of retention is poorly defined in the literature. So true retention would be after the course is ended. And a lot of the literature uses the final exam as a measure of retention, but this would not be a true measure. So the 2 highlighted in orange there are the 2 studies that we reviewed that actually use the true measure of retention. And they both show superior retention with the hybrid delivery model of learning. And also, another important aspect that we reviewed in the literature is that blended learning actually produces superior outcomes in the higher areas of the cognitive domain, according to Bloom's taxonomy. So this researchers noted this may be because the students are able to get the lower level of the pyramid of knowledge and comprehension through the computer-aided aspect, and then come to class ready to apply this knowledge at a higher level. And this also translated to higher scores on practicals. According to some of the evidence, comparing courses with the practical exam results, just again suggesting that students in the lab already had this knowledge base, so they were able to spend more time developing psychomotor skills and applying this knowledge to case application in class, rather than having to focus on the lower, more didactic components of the courses.
So among the literature, we found some common limitations. The first one being the lack of research in physical therapy education in particular. Among the 18 studies that we looked at, only 4 of them occurred in a physical therapy curriculum, and only 1 of them was in a similar type physical agents class setting. The next one is the scarcity of evidence from the psychomotor domain. So what we did this in was in a physical therapy or physical agents course, and that requires a lot of hands-on work, a lot of psychomotor training, which is tough to get through computer-aided, and a lot of studies did not have this type of learning involved with their coursework. And then the last one is the comfort level with technology. This kind of seems like it's reduced in the technological advancement that we're having day to day. So, but there still is that limitation. One of the studies by Mozami and his colleagues reported several people excluded from their study because they simply weren't, they didn't feel advanced enough in their computer skills. So this brings us to our refined research purpose, which was to examine the efficacy of computer-aided instruction compared to face-to-face learning in a physical agents course within Daemen College's Doctor of Physical Therapy curriculum on a single semester cohort. This was the second cohort. The first one was performed last year with the class of 15 individuals. And our hypothesis was that computer-aided instruction would be as effective as face-to-face in the acquisition of knowledge within this course. So again, as said before, this is a retrospective analysis, meaning that the course was completed, all exams and lectures were completed by the time that we began our data collection and analysis. This was during the spring 2014 semester, and this was among myself and my colleagues' class of 2016. We looked at the acquisition of knowledge among 4 examinations and 1 cumulative final examination.
So further into the methods, it was the population consisted of our whole class, which is 67 students at the time. However, you see that the sample size up there is actually 65. 2 of the students were omitted based on their tests actually were lost. So unfortunately, I cannot really gather that information. And again, the gender is unknown because we were entitled numbers based on our class, and because the names and numbers are blacked out, that the gender is unknown. However, it's a pretty fair split between male and females, so it's a nice sign there. Relative to the instructional methods, throughout the semester, there was 8 computer-aided instruction modules, again, which we'll discuss further, 15 in-class lectures, 2 case studies were part of the lectures as well, but we did not consist them as actual lecture-based material. 14 overall labs, which again are the psychomotor hands-on component, and 4 practicals for those labs. So here's a little bit of background on how the students acquired the information via online. So every Daemon student has a Blackboard account with a student name and password, which is basically Daemon's own online source for course content. So under the Blackboard, the modules for the online material will be opened up the week during the modules were supposed to be on the schedule. So during that time, the student could open the module throughout that week at any time, as long as it was within that week. And they could basically watch the course through that, the Blackboard or the PowerPoint and the narrated part of that. And then following, they would take a quiz. So again, I highlight the student were competent in Blackboard, so there were never really any issues with that. And again, each of the 8 online instructional modules took place on a face-to-face lecture that day. So there was no class meeting on the schedule for that day, which I'll show you in a schematic in a little bit. So here's the schematic. So it looks a little confusing, but I'll kind of highlight the main points here. So from the top to the bottom would be chronological order of the course of that semester. So if we look at just the white, these are just will be basically labs all throughout the semester. So pretty spread out. The yellowish orange are the online. So as you can see, they were never bundled up throughout the semester in one portion. They were actually pretty fairly distributed throughout the whole course. And then the light blue here would have been the in-class lectures. And then again, the dark green are the actual examinations or practicals, so any type of assessment for the course. So a little bit further into the background of the course, the lecture or face-to-face meant 1 to 2 times a week for 55 minutes. And again, this is all cognitive-based, so it was all lecture component, no hands-on. And then this gave the students a found background for the lab, so they were able, should be prepared to go to lab with some information based on how to use the modalities, some science behind the modalities, etc. And the labs are 1 time a week, a little bit longer in duration for 120 minutes. And there were 3 lab groups basically throughout the lab course because of such a large student sample that to have a fair amount of time with each modality in the course, students were in smaller groups to give them an equal opportunity.
Okay, so the computer-aided instruction portion of the course, students have access to the Blackboard, as Sean discussed, and we become available the week it was listed on that big schedule schematic we showed you. And the module for each section that contained a narrated PowerPoint, which was also available to students in a YouTube video format, so they could access it on other devices that may not have PowerPoint. And also, some modules contain other resources such as peer-reviewed articles relating to various topics of physical aging. And a short quiz was component was included in each module. It was timed, usually 5 to 10 questions, and students would get 20 minutes and 3 attempts to take this quiz, and they were awarded the highest score. The quizzes were designed to ensure comprehension of the basic components of the material. And moving on to how we collected the data. So this, perhaps the most important part is what we did not do is we we collected the data from the 4 exams and 1 final exam, but we did not look at how the students did on each exam, because each exam included components from both the face-to-face and the computer-aided instruction portions of the course. So what we did was we categorized each response to each of the questions into, say, 4 multiple choice questions. So we would categorize each response as either if it came from the computer-aided portion or the face-to-face portion of the lecture. And we would award 1 point for recognizing. We would award one point for recognizing correct choices if the student identified the correct answer, and also a point for identifying the non-correct answers, and 0 for missing the right answer, and 0 for identifying the wrong answer. And BJ will explain it further with some picture examples. But what we did basically is calculate the percentage that students were able to identify correctly from the face-to-face portion versus the computer-aided instruction.
All right, so we'll give you a few examples here. Again, stressing what Dan said, that this is based on the percentage correct of the responses for computer-aided learning compared to face-to-face. So we'll look in the upper left-hand corner here for scoring the correct multiple choice. The student here answered B as the correct answer, which was the correct answer here. So they are awarded 1 point for choice B. They are also awarded a point for A, C, and D for correctly identifying them as incorrect answers to the question. On the top right here, we have scoring an incorrect multiple choice. So in this case, the student chose C, which is the incorrect answer, as the correct answer is D. They receive a point for A and D for correctly identifying them as incorrect options, but do not get a point for B or C for identifying them as incorrect or correct, and they were actually vice versa. In the bottom left here is scoring correct all of the above. So A, B, C, and D are all correct answers. Therefore, E is the best answer to the question. In this case, the student answered E and received a point for each one of those, correctly identifying that they knew A through D were all correct answers. Lastly, over to the bottom right here, scoring the incorrect all of the above. The correct answer is E, all of the above, as A through D are all correct answers. However, the student answered B as correct, assuming that they did not realize A, C, and D were also correct answers. Therefore, they only receive credit for B, as that is the correct answer, not the best answer. And A, C, D, and E were all incorrect, so they received 0 points for that. Here is a little snippet of our spreadsheet that we place. So it looks like binary code there. But so what we're going to show you here is right along the bottom you see C's and F. That's associated with computer-aided learning or face-to-face learning. Again, you see each response is associated with one of those origins for information delivery. So we'll look at the highlighted box over here. That's a computer-aided question. So we take that from each student. We take the sum of it over the total, and on that question, no one did too well, but so then we get a percentage of 43.08% correct on that specific response. So now we'll take a look over here on question 2, choice A. Was it, the answer was learned in a face-to-face lecture. So on this one, 64 out of 65 students received credit for identifying that as the incorrect answer, and so 96.46% got that right. So we would take all of those, combine it, and receive a percent correct among both of those.
Okay, so taking what BJ was just explaining and condensing it all into two simple charts. On the left here, we separated exams 1 through 5. You'll notice that exam 1 was all face-to-face, and starting with exam 2, computer-aided instruction was introduced, and then followed through exam 5. At the bottom, we have the breakdowns of the total number of responses. Those are not number of questions per exam, but those are the potential responses for all 5 exams. 492 potential responses for face-to-face and 280 potential computer-aided responses. In total, we had just under 51,000 data points plotted. This is broken down into 65 students between 5 exams. On the right here, you can see the averages, and I just want to reiterate that these averages are not representative of student grades or course exam grades. These are simply the percentage of correctly identified correct and correctly identified incorrect responses chosen for both face-to-face and computer-aided instruction. Across the modes, they are relatively similar with some variation. You'll notice that either they are within a point or so of each other, or down towards the bottom, you can notice a few of the outliers. So 83.13% correctly identified or correctly eliminated incorrect face-to-face responses for that particular question, and 91% for computer-aided. So you'll see there's a variety of variability in different types of questions. In total, face-to-face and computer-aided instruction, 88.37% of the responses were correctly identified as correct or correctly identified as incorrect. And for computer-aided, 87.71% were correctly identified as correct or correctly identified as incorrect. In total, for all 5 exams and all 65 students, variability of only 0.66% existed between the two averages. So you can see that they're very similar in the acquisition of knowledge. So because our data were nominal, the ones and zeros were simply arbitrary, tags, but on the yes or no responses. Our subjects were also related. They took the same exams. All 65 students took each exam, so they were related in their responses. So we chose to use the Wilcoxon sign rate test. In this test, we identified the null hypothesis as there was no difference between face-to-face and computer-aided instruction in acquisition of knowledge. And we compared that against the alternative hypothesis, that there is a difference amongst experimental groups on the acquisition of knowledge between the two modes. With statistical tests, the smaller the p-value, let me clarify for you guys. The smaller the p-value, support the alternative hypothesis. We are relating the size of the p-value to the significance level. In our case, the significance level was 0.05, and our p-value was 0.693. So you notice it was significantly larger than the significance level. Smaller significance levels will side with the alternative hypothesis that there is a difference amongst experimental groups. However, because ours was larger, we chose to retain the null hypothesis. We failed to reject it, identifying that there was no difference amongst experimental groups on the acquisition of knowledge. So we could conclude that based on our cohort of 65 physical therapy students in a physical agents course, that there was no difference between knowledge acquisition in computer-aided versus face-to-face learning methods. So, therefore, computer-aided can be used as an alternative to face-to-face learning for physical agents in the physical therapy curriculum. And we could potentially speculate that the use of blended learning, so combining the advantages of computer-aided and face-to-face, may be more beneficial in the acquisition of knowledge.
All right, so to finish off, we have some limitations that we came together with about our research. So in a lot of the literature, they use a student satisfaction survey. That is something that we did not do, obviously. And this is important because even though one mode of delivery may be better or not, it's important to have the student input whether they wanted to do it or not, because ultimately that's going to have an effect on how they learn the material. Next bullet point there is difficulty of the material. So regarding the online or in lecture, some modalities may have been easier to understand versus others, as well as some may have been a longer study of topic with more in-depth parameters, such as eSTEM. So some of those differences between the in-lecture versus online may have played a role in how the students learned the material. The online portion, as Dan discussed earlier, had a quiz portion where you had 3 opportunities to take the quiz immediately following the PowerPoint. And this gave the student the opportunity to help acquire the material in a better fashion as they were tested ultimately right after the material. Again, with the 3 times they were tested, that repetition is an indicator of really locking in the learning material from the online portions where the in-lecture portions did not have quizzes after each lecture. Then finally, chance. So during the examination, we cannot fully account for a student guessing at an answer they did not know, so that could skew the data a little bit, but with any study, there's always going to be a chance of, you know, someone guessing or a little bit of luck there, so it's ultimately a limitation as well. So thank you all for attending our presentation. We'll just have questions after the next presentation as well. Thank you.